An Omegaverse BL story. The most dangerous people are the ones who don't need to prove it. The boy without a name. The thing about being the son of Caius and Dorian Ashveil was that Leo had never once paid for a meal in his life. Not because he couldn't, but because every restaurant owner within a 50-kilometer radius would rather faint than charge in Ashveil. He hated it. Which was exactly why, on the first morning of his second year at Creston University, Leo Ashveil stood in the cafeteria line like any other student, tray in hand, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big, and answered to the name on his enrollment form. Leon Ash. Simple. Clean. Forgettable. Leon. Leon, wait for me. Mika came sprinting across the cafeteria, nearly knocking over a second-year beta who made the mistake of being in the way. The Omega crashed into Leo's side with all the grace of a golden retriever. You walked so fast. You were taking photos of the bulletin board again. It had a new cat adoption poster. Leo steadied him without a word and moved forward in the line. This was normal. Mika was chaos and Leo was the wall that chaos bounced off of. They'd been best friends since high school. Back when Leo had still been enrolled under his real name and spent most of freshman year watching people trip over themselves to impress him before he'd had enough and transferred. No one at Creston knew who he was. He'd made sure of it. He paid for his own breakfast with cash, always cash. Sat in the corner seat with the best view of all exits. A habit his dad had drilled into him since age 5, and watched the morning crowd filter in. That was when he first saw him in the far corner. Alone. A stack of books beside him like a small fortress. Dark-rimmed glasses. Pale skin. Dark hair that fell across his forehead without any apparent effort. He was reading something thick and academic-looking, and he hadn't touched his coffee. An alpha. Leo could tell by scent even across the room. Something cool. Like rain on stone. Steady and contained. Unusual. Most alphas broadcast themselves like a declaration. This one was more like a locked door. Who's that? Leo asked. Mika followed his gaze and immediately brightened. Oh, that's Ezra Voss. He's in the science and data faculty. Super smart, apparently like scary smart, but totally antisocial. No one really talks to him. Mika leaned in. He once corrected a professor's research paper during a lecture and the professor just accepted it and moved on. Leo looked at Ezra Voss for another 3 seconds. Ezra Voss did not look up from his book. Leo looked away. It meant nothing. It was barely a moment. He ate his rice and forgot about it. He did not forget about it. The fight. 3 weeks later, someone made the mistake of cornering Mika behind the east building. Leo had been heading back from the library when he caught it. A spike of distressed Omega scent, sharp and panicked in the wind. His body moved before his brain finished the thought. There were 3 of them. Second-year alphas with too much confidence and not enough sense. They had Mika backed against the wall. One of them crowding his space with a smirk that Leo immediately wanted to remove from his face. Hey! Leo's voice was quiet. All 3 turned. The scent that rolled off Leo when he was angry was something his papa had once described as standing in front of an oncoming tide. He didn't growl. He didn't posture. He just was still and cold and entirely certain, and the 3 alphas felt it hit them like a wall. Walk away, Leo said. They didn't immediately. One of them, the tallest, tried to hold his ground. Who do you think you? Leo moved. It was fast and clean and precise, and within 40 seconds all 3 of them were on the ground with varying levels of regret, and Mika was clinging to Leo's arm shaking and saying, Okay, that was incredible, but we're definitely getting called to the principal's office. They were called to the principal's office. And the principal, a nervous beta named Dean Harrow who had been sweating since the moment the incident report crossed his desk, made the call that protocol required. Emergency contact notification. He dialed the number on file for Leon Ash. The line picked up on the first ring. Hello, Dean Harrow said. Am I speaking with the guardian of Leon Ash? I'm calling from Creston University regarding an incident. Which building? The voice on the other end was so calm it was almost gentle. Almost. Dean Harrow blinked. I'm sorry. Which building is my son in? Give me an address. The dean gave the address. then sat very still for the next 22 minutes until a matte black car with no visible plates pulled up outside, followed by another, and then a third. Caius Ashveil stepped out of the first car. He was tall. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than the university's annual catering budget. He had Leo's golden eyes, except where Leo's were warm, Caius's were the temperature of deep water. Behind him, Dorian Ashveil stepped out and adjusted his cufflinks. Dean Harrow later described the experience to his therapist as, "The moment I understood what prey animals feel." Leo, sitting in the waiting chair outside the office, heard the doors open and closed his eyes. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Papa." Dorian looked at his son for a long moment, then looked at the bruised knuckles, then back up. "You fought. 3 of them were cornering Mika." A pause. "Good," Dorian said simply and sat beside him. Caius took the chair on the other side and said nothing, which was how Leo knew he also thought it was good. The school, of course, went absolutely sideways. The moment staff recognized Caius Ashveil, Dean Harrow nearly knocked over his own desk. The 3 alphas were summoned, pale-faced and terrified, and their families were contacted. Leo watched it happen from the hallway with the expression of a man watching a building he had personally set on fire. Mika stood beside him with wide eyes. "Leon," he whispered. "Leon, why does everyone look like they're about to cry?" "No reason," Leo said. "Leo," Dorian called from inside the office. Smooth as silk, Mika turned very slowly to look at Leo. "Leo?" Leo winced. "Leon Ash," Mika said, very carefully. "Is your name Leo Ashveil?" A long pause. "We can talk about this later." "Leon." Later, Mika, the observer. What Leo didn't know, what no one knew, was that Ezra Voss had been watching him for 4 months. Not in a way that showed. That was the important part. Ezra was very good at not showing things. He had first noticed Leon Ash on the 2nd day of the semester, in the way that a well-calibrated instrument notices an anomaly. There was something wrong about the way Leon moved. Too controlled, too aware, always with his back to a wall, always cataloging exits. That wasn't normal student behavior. That was trained behavior. Ezra had filed it away and started paying attention. Within 2 weeks he had filled half a notebook. Not obsessively, analytically. He told himself this regularly. He was simply someone who noticed patterns, and Leon Ash was a pattern that didn't fit. The way he paid for everything in cash. The way he deflected personal questions with such practiced ease that people didn't notice they'd been deflected. The way his scent, warm, like sunlight through amber, was subtly suppressed, as if he wore a scent-neutralizing product every single day. Who suppresses their scent on a college campus? Someone who doesn't want to be identified. Ezra had looked into it. He was thorough. And when the pieces aligned, the eyes, the bone structure, a single archived photograph from 6 years ago at a charity gala. He had sat very quietly in his corner of the library and understood that he had been sharing a campus with Leo Ashveil for 4 months without knowing it. He'd also understood, in the same quiet moment, that this changed nothing about how he felt. He'd been trying not to feel it since September. He was very bad at not feeling it. Leo's scent made something in Ezra's chest go still and certain in a way nothing else ever had. When Leo laughed at something Mika said, Ezra's pen stopped moving. When Leo walked past his table in the cafeteria, close enough that the warmth of his presence registered like a temperature change, Ezra had to reset himself like a compass finding north. He had calculated, after some internal debate, that this was extremely inconvenient. He had also, very quietly, begun to remove certain problems from Leo's orbit. The third-year alpha who had been asking around about the quiet guy Leon, with an expression Ezra didn't like, found himself suddenly unable to source the off-campus housing he'd been eyeing, due to a data error that Ezra had in no way been responsible for. He had been entirely responsible. A rumor that had started circulating about Mika, ugly, targeted, had died within 12 hours when the person who'd started it found their academic record flagged for a plagiarism review that was completely legitimate and had simply been pending for 8 months and happened to be processed now. Ezra was patient. Ezra was careful. Ezra removed things from Leo's path like a gardener pulling weeds, and Leo never saw a single one of them. After the fight, After the black cars arrived and Dean Harrow lost all color from his face and the campus spent the afternoon vibrating with the news that Leon Ash was Leo Ashveil. Ezra sat in his corner and made a small note in his book. His parents came. Protective. Functional family unit. He's uncomfortable with the attention but not with them. Discomfort is about exposure, not relationship. He underlined exposure. Then he looked up across the cafeteria, and for one fraction of a second, found Leo looking back at him. Leo looked away first. Ezra looked back down at his notebook. His pen had left a small ink blot on the page where his hand had stopped moving. He didn't fix it. Approach. The news of Leo's identity spread through campus like water through paper. Fast and total and impossible to stop. By the next morning, people who had never noticed him were suddenly very aware of exactly where he sat and what he ordered and whether he seemed approachable. He did not seem approachable. 3 people tried to sit with him at breakfast. One of them opened with, "I actually knew you were in Ashveil the whole time." Leo looked at him for long enough that the boy picked up his tray and left on his own. Mika, who had apparently processed the revelation overnight and come out the other side at peace with it, sat across from Leo and stole a piece of his toast. "So, your dad is Caius Ashveil?" "Yes." The Caius Ashveil who made 3 international banking executives cry in a meeting last year. He says they were already emotional. "And your papa is Dorian Ashveil, who sent a strongly worded letter to a government minister that resulted in a policy change." It was a very strongly worded letter. Mika stared at him. "Leo." "Mika. You paid for my coffee last week with exact change from your jacket pocket. I don't like carrying large bills." "Leo. The money is still real, the coffee was still good. Can we move on?" "I'm just saying," Mika said, settling back, "that you are the most aggressively normal rich person I have ever encountered, and I've now decided it's my favorite thing about you and nothing is different between us." Leo looked at him. Something in his chest, which had been braced since yesterday, went slightly loose. "Nothing's different." "Nothing," Mika confirmed, and stole another piece of toast. It was later that afternoon, in the library, that Leo decided to do something he'd been circling for weeks without admitting it. He picked up his bag, walked to the far corner, and sat down across from Ezra Voss. Ezra didn't look up from his book. "You're Ezra Voss," Leo said. "Yes," Ezra said. He turned a page. "I'm Leo." "I know." Leo studied him. Most people, when Leo gave them direct attention, had some kind of reaction, a straightening, a flush, a nervous laugh. Ezra Voss turned another page and reached for his coffee without looking up. "You always sit alone," Leo said. "I prefer it." "So do I, usually." Ezra finally looked up. His eyes were dark gray, steady behind his glasses. He looked at Leo with the calm of someone who had already run every scenario and arrived at this moment fully prepared. "And yet," Ezra said mildly. Leo blinked. Ezra looked back down at his book. For the first time in a long time, Leo felt something he couldn't immediately categorize. He opened his own book, set it on the table, and read approximately no words of it for the next hour. They sat in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. That was the strange part. It was the least uncomfortable Leo had felt in public since arriving at Creston. When he finally packed up to leave, Ezra spoke without looking up. "Same time tomorrow is fine," he said. "If you want." Leo paused with his bag strap in his hand. "Okay," he said. He left. Ezra watched him go. Just for a second, just until he turned the corner. Then looked back at his book. He had read the same page 4 times. Rain and Revelations. They developed a routine without naming it. Library corner. Late afternoon. 2 hours of companionable silence with occasional conversation that somehow never felt like small talk. Leo learned that Ezra was studying computational biology and had 3 published papers before the age of 20. Ezra listened to Leo talk about architecture, something Leo had never told anyone he cared about, with the focused attention of someone committing it to permanent memory. Leo started looking forward to it. That scared him a little. He wasn't used to looking forward to things that involved other people. But Ezra was quiet in the right way. He never pushed. He never performed. He was simply there, present and steady, and Leo's alpha instincts, which were usually coiled and alert around unfamiliar people, went calm around him in a way he couldn't explain. Then came the Tuesday in November. They'd been at the library until the late afternoon, and when they stepped outside, the sky had turned the color of iron and the first rain came down hard and sudden. The campus was 15 minutes away. The bus had just left. "My place is closer," Ezra said. He said it simply, without inflection, the way he said most things. "For minutes from here." Leo looked at the rain, looked at Ezra. "Okay." Ezra's home was a townhouse just outside campus, clean, minimal, everything in its place with the precision of a person who thought in systems. Books organized by subject then author. A single large monitor on a desk covered in neat handwritten notes. No clutter. Except, Leo saw it the moment he stepped past the entryway. On the wall beside the study desk, half obscured behind a pinboard, a series of photographs. Campus spaces, usual angles, but in every single one, he crossed the room slowly. In every single one, he was in the frame. Not center. Not obvious. In the background, mid-motion, caught in a natural moment. Laughing at Mika, reading on the steps, buying coffee. At least 30 photographs. Maybe more. And on the desk, the notebook, left open to a page covered in his own name. Leo. L. Sent profile change Tuesday, suppressor wearing thin? Note, check brand. Observations. Dates. Timings. Leo stood very still. He heard Ezra stop in the doorway behind him. The silence stretched. "How long?" Leo said. His voice came out even. He was surprised by that. A pause. "Since the second week of semester." "The whole time?" "Yes." Leo turned around. Ezra stood in the doorway with the stillness of someone who had known this moment would arrive and had chosen not to hide from it. His expression wasn't guilty. It wasn't desperate. It was just open in the way that only completely honest things are open. "You should be angry," Ezra said. "Should I?" "It's reasonable." Leo looked at him for a long time. Alpha to alpha. Not combative, assessing. Looking for the shape of something. "Were you going to do anything with it? Any of this?" "No." Immediate. Certain. "It was never about, I would never. I just needed to know you were safe. That the people around you were safe for you." A pause. "I know how that sounds. It sounds like you've been quietly watching over me for 4 months without telling me." Leo said. "Yes. Without me knowing. Yes. You called the housing complaint on Park from 3rd year." Ezra didn't answer, which was itself an answer. Leo exhaled. He looked at the photographs again. There was nothing invasive about them. They were the images of someone paying attention, someone cataloging with care more than intent. He thought about the way Ezra had always been slightly more alert when Leo moved through crowds. The way he'd once looked up, sharp and immediate, the moment before Leo had noticed the escalating argument near the campus gate. He thought about sitting in the library corner for hours and feeling, for the first time in a year, genuinely calm. "You could have just talked to me," Leo said. Something shifted in Ezra's expression. Small, but there. "You don't like being approached. You have 17 exits from this conversation drafted in your head right now." Leo opened his mouth. Closed it. "You would have deflected me," Ezra said quietly. "And I would have let you. And then you would have been safe and I would have stayed in my corner and that would have been fine. I would have made it fine." "But?" Leo asked. Ezra looked at him. "But you came to me." The rain hit the windows. Leo was quiet for a long time. 98%, he said. Ezra blinked. "Compatibility." Leo's voice was careful. "I looked it up. After the first week in the library. I don't know why I did it." He paused. "I've never tested that high with anyone." The stillness in the room changed quality. "Neither have I," Ezra said. Leo crossed the room. Slowly. Ezra stayed where he was, let Leo come to him, and when Leo stopped close enough that the warmth of his scent was fully present between them, Ezra's composure showed its single fracture. A breath, just one, that wasn't fully steady. "I'm not angry," Leo said. "I know," Ezra said. "You would have left already." "I want you to tell me things," Leo said. "Not keep them from me. Not manage me." "I know." A pause. I'll try. It's not, you make it difficult to be rational. Leo looked at him. You've had 4 months of data on me. And I still couldn't calculate what you'd do today. Leo almost smiled. It wasn't quite a smile yet, but it was in the neighborhood. Good, he said. He reached out and adjusted Ezra's glasses, which had gone slightly crooked, and Ezra went very, very still under the touch. Good, Leo said again, quieter. And that was how it started. Gravity. They didn't announce it. It wasn't that kind of thing. Mika noticed first, because Mika always noticed feelings before the people having them did. He watched Leo and Ezra at their library corner one afternoon. Ezra reading, Leo sketching building facades in his notebook, their shoulders close enough to almost touch, and said nothing except to send Leo a string of flower emojis that night, to which Leo responded, "Stop it." And Mika responded with more flowers. Ezra, for his part, was almost comically consistent. Nothing about him changed in public. Still quiet, still watching, still the most invisible presence in any room. In private, with Leo, the containment loosened just enough to reveal the shape of what lived underneath it. He cooked, precisely, methodically, the way he did everything, but Leo discovered that he made food specifically calibrated to things Leo mentioned in passing. The soup you said you liked when it rains. A specific brand of tea he'd seen Leo hold once at the campus stall and noted. A notebook Leo had mentioned offhand that appeared on his desk the next day, still in its wrapper, placed without comment. You have to stop doing that, Leo said once. Ezra looked up from his book. Doing what? The remembering everything, and then acting on it. Leo set down the tea. He paused. It's a lot. Too much. Leo looked at him. Ezra's expression was measured, but his scent gave him away. Something that had tightened with the question. A held breath. No, Leo said. That's the problem. It's not too much. I like it. And I'm not used to liking things people do for me. Ezra was quiet for a moment. You spend a lot of energy making sure people treat you normally. Ordinary. It's a pause. I don't want to treat you ordinarily. You're not ordinary. Leo stared at him. You are also very normal, Ezra added. In the ways that matter to you. I understand the distinction. Leo picked up the tea. Took a sip. Set it down. You're going to be insufferable, he said. Probably, Ezra agreed and looked back at his book. Leo looked at his profile, the clean line of him steady and certain, and thought about what it meant to be known. Really known, not performed at. He thought about the photographs on the wall, which Ezra had offered to take down and Leo had said to leave, because they were not a threat and he was self-aware enough to know he found them more reassuring than alarming. Someone had been watching over him without asking for anything in return. In the quiet and without a name on it, and Leo had been safe the whole time without knowing. He reached across the table and closed Ezra's book. Ezra looked at him. Leo leaned across the distance between them. The kiss was soft and brief and tasted like rain and certainty. And when Leo pulled back, Ezra was looking at him with the expression of someone whose entire calculated composure had just been undone by a single variable he had not sufficiently prepared for. You said you couldn't calculate me, Leo said. I'm revising my models, Ezra said, slightly unsteadily. Leo sat back and reopened his own notebook. Good luck with that. 2 families. Telling his parents was less of a conversation and more of a discovery. Dorian Ashveil had known for 3 weeks before Leo said anything. Leo found this out by sitting down at Sunday breakfast and having his papa pass him coffee and say, without looking up from his newspaper, "So, Voss." Leo set down his cup. How? I'm your papa, darling. How is not a question. Caius, from across the table, said nothing, which meant he also knew. Leo looked between them. I was going to tell you, Leo said. You were working up to it, Dorian said. I understand. First relationships are nerve-wracking. I'm an alpha. I'm not nerve-wracking, Ed. Your left knee has been bouncing under the table since you sat down, Dorian said mildly. Leo pressed his knee flat. Caius almost smiled. We looked into him, Caius said. This was not a surprise. Caius looked into everyone. Ezra Voss. Parents are researchers, both retired. He has no troubling associations. His records are clean, His academic history is extraordinary, Dorian supplied. Extraordinary, Caius agreed. A pause. He also had a housing complaint filed against an alpha in Leo's year last month that appears to have originated from an IP address adjacent to campus data systems. Silence. I don't know anything about that, Leo said. No, Caius agreed. You wouldn't have needed to. Another pause. This one had a different weight. He's been protecting you, Dorian said quietly. Not accusatory. Considering. In his own way, Leo said. Yes. His parents looked at each other. The kind of look that moved through years of shared language, shorthand built from a life lived together. Then Dorian looked back at Leo. Bring him to dinner, he said. Leo tried not to visibly exhale. That's terrifying for him. It should be, Caius said. He should understand what he's part of now. You'll behave, Leo said. I always behave, Caius said. Leo looked at his papa. He'll behave mostly, Dorian said. I'll supervise. Ezra arrived at the Ashveil residence on a Thursday evening in December, carrying wine that he had researched for 3 days and wearing a suit that fit him precisely. Leo met him at the door and Ezra looked at him for a moment and said, very quietly, This house has security I can feel from the gate. 12 layers, Leo said. Don't think about it. I always think about it. Then think about it quietly. Caius met Ezra in the hallway. They looked at each other. 2 alphas, one of them the most powerful man in the country, the other 20 years old and not visibly afraid, which Caius noted with the small internal register of someone ticking a box, and Caius said, Ezra Voss. Sir, Ezra said, you filed a housing complaint on an alpha who had been asking about my son. A pause. The complaint was legitimate. It was also fast. I had the information already. Caius was quiet for a moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, good. Dorian appeared behind Caius like a sentence finishing itself, smiled at Ezra with the warmth that Leo had inherited, and said, Come in. The food is ready and my husband will stop being intimidating once he's eaten. I'm not being intimidating, Caius said. You're always being intimidating, Dorian said. Come, Ezra. Tell me about your research. Leo watched Ezra get gently steered into the dining room by his papa and met his dad's eyes. You like him, Leo said. I'm assessing him, Caius said. You already like him. A pause. The complaint was fast and clean and untraceable. He protected you without being asked and without making it about himself. Caius looked toward the dining room. That's not nothing. Leo followed his gaze. Through the doorway, Ezra was answering his papa's questions about his research with careful, thorough honesty, and Dorian was listening with the focus he usually reserved for things he found genuinely impressive. No, Leo said softly. It's not nothing. Epilogue New Weight. 3 years later, Leo sat at the kitchen table of the home they had built together. Not too large, not too showy, just right, with his feet tucked under him and a cup of tea going cold at his elbow, reading Ezra's latest paper with a pencil because he liked leaving notes in the margins. Ezra appeared in the doorway, looked at him and said, You're pale. I'm always pale. You're paler than your usual pale. Leo looked up. He was quiet for a moment. Then he pushed a small box across the table. Ezra crossed the room, opened it, looked at what was inside. He looked up. Twins, Leo said. His voice was careful and soft and entirely unable to hide what it was doing. The test confirms twins. Ezra sat down. Slowly, he looked at the tests again. Then at Leo. I have no precedent for this, Ezra said. That's new for you. Leo. I know. Leo reached across the table and covered Ezra's hand with his. I know. Ezra turned his hand over and held on. The call to Leo's parents lasted 4 minutes before Caius Ashveil personally arrived at their door, which given the distance involved implied either a car already in motion or a helicopter. Dorian came through the door behind him, looked at Leo sitting on the sofa, and immediately sat beside him and took his face in both hands. You're all right? He asked. I'm fine, Papa. It's twins. Not a crisis. It's twins, Dorian repeated. with feeling. Caius stood in the middle of the room looking at Ezra with the expression of a man recalculating something large. "Twins," he said. "Yes," Ezra said. "Both healthy. Both healthy." The appointment was this morning. Caius sat in the armchair. He put his elbows on his knees. He was quiet for a moment. "Caius," Dorian said. "I'm fine," Caius said. His voice was exactly as steady as it always was. His eyes were not. "I'm completely fine." "Of course you are," Dorian said gently. Ezra's parents arrived an hour later. Quieter, warmer. His mother with her hands over her mouth and his father shaking Ezra's hand, and then pulling him into a hug that Ezra accepted with only minor stiffness. The house became full of people and noise, and Leo sat in the middle of it, Ezra's hand in his, and thought that this was the most populated his life had ever felt. He did not, for once, want an exit. The months that followed were the most aggressively supervised of Leo's adult life. Ezra cleared his schedule. He did not announce this. He simply no longer had anything scheduled during Leo's appointments, Leo's rest times, Leo's meals, or Leo's occasional stubborn attempts to carry grocery bags that Ezra intercepted with the efficiency of a man whose every instinct had been permanently redirected. "I can carry them," Leo said. "Yes," Ezra agreed, and carried them. "You do know this is excessive." "I know, Ezra." "The bags are carried, Leo." Both families maintained what they called supportive distance and what Leo called being watched from multiple angles at all times. His papa texted 3 times a day. His dad arranged for a driver without saying so, which Leo discovered when the same car appeared outside every time he left the house, and he confronted his dad about it, and his dad said, "It was already in the area. It's always in the area. Convenient." Leo gave up. He was, despite himself, not unhappy about it. The twins arrived on a Sunday 6 minutes apart. The boy first came into the world with his eyes already open, looking around with an expression of calm assessment that made Ezra say, very quietly, "Oh no." "What?" Leo said exhaustedly. "He looks like me." "You say that like it's bad. I know what I was like at every age. It's going to be a project." The girl followed 5 minutes and 40 seconds later, and immediately, with extraordinary volume, made clear that she had opinions about everything. Leo looked at her and started laughing helplessly, because he recognized that energy, and it was entirely his papa's. The waiting room outside held Caius Ashveil, standing, Dorian Ashveil, seated, pretending to read something, both of Ezra's parents, Mika, who had been there since the beginning and cried twice already, and 2 members of the Ashveil family's security detail who had absolutely no official reason to be in a hospital waiting room and were pretending to look at their phones. When the nurse came out, she made eye contact with 6 different people who all stood up simultaneously and took a step back. "Everyone can go in," she said carefully. "But please gently." Caius went first. He stood in the doorway and looked at Leo, tired, bright-eyed, already arguing with Ezra about who the boy looked like, and then at the 2 small sleeping shapes in the cot beside the bed. His expression did something complicated and quiet that Leo had only ever seen once before, on the day of Leo's own birth in a photograph his papa had shown him. "Dad," Leo said. Caius crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his son for a long moment. Then at the twins. "Boy or girl first?" he asked, because that was easier than the other things. "Boy," Leo said. 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Caius nodded. He was quiet for a moment. "Leo," he said. "Yeah. You're all right." "I'm perfect," Leo said. "We're perfect." Caius looked at the twins again. Something settled in him, deep and permanent. "Yes," he said. "You are." Dorian appeared at Caius's shoulder, took one look at the babies, and made a sound that he would deny making for the rest of his life. He sat on Leo's other side and held his hand and didn't say anything for a while, which for Dorian meant something very large was happening behind his eyes. Ezra watched all of it. He sat on Leo's other side, warm and steady as always, and he looked at Leo with the same expression he'd worn the day in the library when Leo had first sat down across from him. Present, certain, arranged around a fixed point. Leo caught him looking. "Stop calculating," Leo said. "I'm not calculating," Ezra said. You're calculating. I'm appreciating. Leo leaned his head against Ezra's shoulder. Outside the door, Mika was audibly emotional. One of the security detail had abandoned pretending and was looking at the babies through the window with an expression of unguarded softness. The room was full. Everyone Leo loved was in it. Okay, Leo said quietly, looking at the two small sleeping faces. Okay, we can do this. Ezra's hand found his. Yes, he said. We can. And that was how the Ashveil Voss household came to be. Noisy and watched over and full of a love so dense it had its own gravity. Where the boy grew up with his father's calm eyes and his dad's unsettling ability to assess a room, and the girl grew up with her grandfather Dorian's perfect instinct for the exact thing to say, and both of them were protected, quietly, completely, without them ever having to ask, by everyone who had loved their parents first. Leo never did stop wanting a normal life. He just found, eventually, that this one was better.